So my name is Bob Jizokis. I'm the principal here at the high school, and with me tonight is John Cannon. He's the AP and IB coordinator. Here he is right here. I have a couple opening slides. I just want to talk about one sort of general big umbrella idea and some smaller ideas under it. And then I'm going to turn it over to John, who's really going to talk about the details of the IB diploma program. That's my big idea. IB is good for all students, all right? All students, not just those of you sitting in this room. And the three things I'm going to talk about to get after that are why we are an IB World School, what being an IB World School looks like, and then the diploma program itself. So why are we an IB World School? I'm going to show you two numbers. Any guesses what those might be? Students, this is like class. You can raise your hand or shout out an answer. Adults too. Any guesses? Yeah. Something about graduation percentages, yes. It has to do with last year's seniors. The 93% is the percentage of last year's seniors who applied to at least one college. And then the 91% are the percentage of last year's seniors who accepted and went to a college. So our percentages are high. So why are we an IB school? That's the reason. IB is a high school program that prepares students for college and university. Hands down, that is the main reason we have the IB program. There's lots of other things that come with it and benefits, but because of who we are, we have a lot of students going off to college. IB really gets students ready to do that. All right, next idea. What being an IB World School looks like. First one, we are vertically aligned from grade 9 to 12. And what that means, well, first let me tell you a story. When we were about to open the school, there were no kids yet. It must have been like 2006, 2007. Is that right? Yeah. I was on the planning team. We're at the at the school board, and we're just talking about what this school should be. And one of the ideas that we talked about a lot at a lot of different times was the idea that students change from grade 9 to 12, right? They develop. And when the light bulb goes on, when they get a passion for something, they should be able to pursue that passion. So what we've consciously done with curriculum and skill building is vertically align the IB stuff from grade 12 right down to grade 9. So that if you're in a Roots of Thought PSP class, a Roots of Thought honors class, physical science class, you are getting IB stuff there. You don't really know it yet, but you are. Some of the rubrics are the same, but they're sort of level to ninth graders. The skills, the terms they hear, so all that is present way down in ninth grade just to get them ready, because you never know when someone has a passion for something, they just want to go for it. So we vertically align the curriculum from grade 9 to 12 because we're an IB World School. Second one, teacher training. It is my goal, we're not there yet, John, but it is my goal to have every teacher in the building trained in IB. And what that looks like now, there are teachers who teach ninth grade Roots of Thought who are trained as IB teachers, but that's not in their schedule this year. And we do that consciously just to get after that idea of vertical alignment so that teachers in ninth grade are sort of thinking about IB and getting the students there ready for IB in grades 11 and 12. So teacher training is really important to us. And we just send lots of groups every year just to keep up with that training so everybody eventually is trained. All right, internal and external IB assessments. So I'm going to start with the external assessments. That's like the SATs. Happens outside. Where do our students go? Yep. So you go over to St. Elizabeth Seton at the end of May-ish or mid-May, and you sit down and you take an assessment. That's an external assessment that IB gives to our kids, really. We also have internal assessments, and so your students will know those as IAs. That could be a paper in history, an oral assessment in literature class, oral assessments in world language classes, the group 4 science lab project, basically. So these are IB exams that our teachers actually give and assess and score. And then what happens, a teacher, John's teaching history, he does have to send a little sample of those to IB, to a teacher who is more experienced, I guess, and has been doing IB for a while. And then they're getting those little samples from all over the world, and they look at them, and they say, yeah, Bedford High School is scoring right on the mark, or you're scoring too hard, or you're not scoring hard enough, you're being too easy, and we get moderated, so your scores may change. I may tell you as the examiner that, John, you need to we need to shift your exam scores because you graded too hard. And so internal assessments are done here, but IB moderates those. The great two things about that, that holds us accountable. It holds me accountable, holds my teachers accountable, because there's these external benchmarks that we need to meet. The other one, it gives us a measure against these other IB World schools. So I can compare us to, well, lots of schools in the US, really a lot, and then other schools around the world. So two advantages to having those internal and external IB assessments. All right, another, what it looks like. So 1,999 enrollments in IB classes as of today in this current school year. Enrollments mean seats in the classes. So it's not students, it's not the number of students. So John, if he's taking one IB class, he'll be counted as one enrollment. If I'm taking 3 IB classes, I would count 3 times. So our combined total would be 4. So we have 1,999 enrollments in IB classes, which is pretty cool because our student body, we only have 1,505 students as of today. And juniors and seniors, which this program really applies to, we only have 760. So that last number, if you take out you guys and the senior IB diploma students, it leaves 1,429 enrollments in IB classes. So IB affects, it's just bigger than just diploma. It affects a lot of students. All right, the diploma program itself. So you're a subset of all that stuff, right? And this year, there's 42 of you. We think, and John will talk about that, and there's 53 seniors. So you're just a smaller group of that bigger group, the bigger cohort, taking IB classes. Another thing about the diploma program, something new this year, you'll be sitting in theory of knowledge with students who are not in the diploma program. So probably every other school in the world. You think that's true? Only TOK with diploma students?
I would say about half do and half don't.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. So half do and half don't. We have always limited theory of knowledge to diploma students, but it is such a cool class, we said, this is not a good idea. So we've opened that up to all students. So new for you guys, you'll be in class with students who may be enrolled in some IB classes or may not be, but they really wanted to take IB as an elective, theory of knowledge as an elective. And so that's a cool thing, but it's new to us. And then the last one here, I need you to be true to who you are. So this is a 2-year journey, and you are not going to be the person when you graduate as you are sitting in this room, teenagers. You're just not going to be. You are going to change. Your brains are still being wired, and you're going to be a different person. So what I need you to know, over this course of the 2-year journey, it is okay to change your mind if the diploma is not a fit next year. It just is. If you have different passions that want to take you in different directions and pathways through the high school, I just need you to know it's okay to follow those. Every year we have a couple kids probably who say, no, this year I need more engineering. Or pick it, more art, whatever their passion is. And so they just sort of don't finish with a diploma and follow their passion. You just need to know that is okay. It is, because you're not going to be the same person as you go through this. You're going to change. All right, so in summary, IB, it's just good for all students. Why are we in IB World School? Because it prepares our students for college and university. Hands down, that's what it does. What being an IB World School looks like, all those things I mentioned, that vertically aligned curriculum, training all my teachers, those 2 types of IB assessments, and then lots of students participating in IB. It's not just diploma. And then lastly, it's the IB diploma program, and there is a crazy subset, that's you folks. John's going to talk about why you're crazy right now, actually. I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Bob. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. We can participate back and forth, we can do that. But thank you, Bob. So what I'm hoping to do, I need the clicker. What I'm hoping to do is sort of put into context, some of the data points that Bob pointed out, and then sort of get into the nitty-gritty of what you can expect as students pursuing the IB diploma over the next couple of years, and sort of what that looks like and what the expectations are and sort of what the end goal here is. And one of the things that comes up a lot in my job, and it usually starts around November and it carries on all the way through January, is I get a lot of students who come down to my office and they want to know more about the IB diploma program because it can be like a big old puzzle, putting it together And it's a challenging task because it's very difficult for someone halfway through their freshman year, as Bob suggested, to think about who they're going to be in 3.5 years and then plan backwards from that, all right? So we're pretty confident that there's a diploma path for every student who wants to take it. And so hopefully that sort of comes through in what we talk about tonight. But just to give you a sense of what we're going to talk about, why the IB diploma, understanding the process and the system, who is who, some important people and faces. You probably know most of them already. And then, of course, planning ahead. So we're going to touch on all of these. And some of this stuff is really just in here to support and buttress what Mr. Jazokis already shared with you guys in terms of the data. And we got some new data as well. All right, here we go. First, I like to start the presentation with the IB mission statement. If you've read the Bedford High School mission statement, you'll see a lot of overlap and similarity and consistency with the IB mission statement, and that is by design. As Mr. Jazokis mentioned, when the folks who got together to sort of plan this school before it was built, and they looked at IB and said, yes, we think this is a good choice, we're going to go with it. A lot of the decisions that got made after that were based on the mission of Bedford High School and IB sort of in concert with one another. And so I'll spare you from reading it. Hopefully you can all read it and see it. But there's pretty much all the stuff up there in bold are things that we believe in and we implement here at Bedford High School. Something that you may not be as familiar with, but is no less important, is actually the IB learner profile. So these are 10 characteristics: inquirers, knowledgeable, thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk-takers, balanced, and reflective. Those are 10 characteristics that the IB diploma program sort of values in students and encourages students to be and to develop over time. And so when we look at the various elements of the IB diploma program, specifically when we start talking about the core of the IB diploma program, which will be a little bit later, you'll start to see some of the things a little bit further down on that list that don't really seem very academic, right? It's sometimes as a school, right, as a place of education, we focus a lot on things like inquiry and knowledge and thinking and communicating. I mean, those are some of our school competencies, right? But less often do we talk about being principled, being open-minded, being caring, and sort of what that means. So I'll show you how that fits into the overall program as we go along. All right, so some of the stuff that Mr. Jazokis sort of already touched on, and this is a really big one for us. I mean, this is a really big one. Why the IB diploma, college readiness, and actually college retention is another piece. It's a little bit strange sometimes to be thinking about your entire college experience when you're just getting started in your high school experience, or where you guys are halfway through your high school experience. But I'm going to share with you some data about college retention that shows the value of the IB diploma program. The IB does a lot of research in that area specifically, so I've got some good data to share with you. But it's also worth mentioning that college acceptance and college credits are other benefits of the IB diploma program. So if you were to ask me which is the most important on that list, I think you'll be able to tell which ones we certainly value as an American high school, what we are in this business for. But I will talk about college acceptance benefits and college credit as well, okay? So we'll hit on all of those things. And by the way, at any point, if you have a question, you want some clarification, just raise your hand. No problem at all, okay? And I'll repeat the question. All right, let's talk about college readiness. And so if you were to think, like, what does a good college student need to be? You might see some overlap with that learner profile that I just brought up. But critical thinking, being knowledgeable, being an effective learner. Just to get a little autobiographical, I don't think I was an effective learner until I was probably 20 years old when I started to realize what strategies worked well for me. And at that point in time, I was halfway through college, right? So one of the great things about the IB Diploma program is that students become really effective learners. They learn quickly how they learn and figure out what works for them and then implement that. Good communicators. In this day and age, more than ever, being effective communicators is important, more than ever. And some other things that maybe, if I were a sports analyst, I would say this is an intangible skill, right? It's not something I could necessarily quantify on the back of a baseball card, but being committed, right? If I'm a college or a university, I'm looking for a student who's committed to my college or university. And the IB Diploma program requires commitment. Hard workers, right? You're gonna be a hard worker because you have to be. Necessity requires it. And certainly, at Bedford High School, one of the things I think sets us apart, top to bottom, 9th grade through 12th grade, is the amount of responsibility we ask of our students in their own self-management. And so that's a process, right? I was not a very good self-manager when I was in 9th grade. Probably none of us were. But we got better over time, right? And so that happens. And from my own college experience, I can tell you that time management was correlated pretty closely to success. And then above all, IB students care. They care about what they're learning. They care about the stuff that they're invested in. They care about doing their best to represent their work to the best of their ability. Those are all important things that we think not only represents who students are who choose to do the IB Diploma program, but even if you're not an IB Diploma student, I dare you to come out of taking a rigorous course load at Bedford High School and not coming out this way. I don't think it's possible. And these are the skills. These are the skills that are going to be what enables you to maximize your college experience. So is it working, right? And believe it or not, some of this data is pretty hard to get. And one of the reasons why this data is hard to get is because it relies on the self-reporting of alumni. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, I have just one data point from the United States, from IB Research. And there's two little bar charts there. The dark blue bar is the number of diploma program students who applied to college. 95% of diploma program, diploma candidates effectively enrolled in a four-year university, so that's pretty consistent with our Bedford High School numbers, compared to only 60% nationally in the United States last year. This 2018. And then the bar graph on the right, 79% made it to graduation, whereas only 39% made it to graduation who were not diploma. So I talked a little bit earlier about not just college readiness, but college retention. I think all of us assume that when we enter college, we're going to exit college after 4 years or however many years with the degree that we intended to get. But we're all realistic, and we know that doesn't always happen. But the data on the IB end of things seems to suggest that they are more successful, graduates are more successful in making it to that end point. So I thought I would include that here. As far as the BHS data on that goes, again, it's been really hard for us to find that data. We've been reaching out to alumni. We've sort of changed some things this year, and we sort of expect to get some of that data through Naviance. But actually, most of the data that we have is anecdotal evidence, stories that we hear from alumni who come back and tell us how great they're doing. And I know I have some parents in the room who have children who have gone through the program and have gone on to college and university with great degrees of success, and we hear that story a lot. Kids come back, and most of the time it's a variation of this, okay? I'm way better off than my peers. I know how to manage a heavy workload. I'm not intimidated by a big paper or a research project. The kids who live in my hall don't know where to start, all right? They forget to do things. And I got this. I'm not intimidated by it. I'm not scared by it. That's the sort of anecdotal evidence that we get. It's hard to quantify. But IB has actually done a little bit of that work, and I know that's a lot of text for a small screen, so I'm going to read it to you. This is from a research paper by Conley I don't know how to say that, McGoffey, Davis, Mullen, Farkas, and Fukuda in 2014. The impact of the diploma program on academic and non-academic college readiness was investigated by examining diploma program and non-diploma program graduates at the University of Oregon's Honors College in the United States. And I like to think of Oregon as like West Coast New Hampshire. I feel like we're like, I don't know, we're kindred spirits, New Hampshire and Oregon. While researchers found no difference in college grade point averages between the two groups, diploma program graduates were significantly more likely to persist and to complete college than their non-diploma program counterparts. Qualitative data indicated that diploma program graduates were also better able to adjust to university coursework, specifically highlighting a number of skills gained through participation in the diploma program that were helpful in college, including critical thinking, time management, and research skills. So I only bring this up because I thought it actually spoke to what it is we are trying to do here with the IB diploma program. If what we're trying to do is prepare students for success in college, I was able to find this particular piece of research that supports that. And I was actually thinking about this today, and I was thinking about, Mr. Jazokis mentioned some of the internal and external assessments, and he mentioned that some of those internal assessments might be a research paper, or they might be some sort of oral dialogue that you have with your teacher. In business management, what they do is they evaluate the health of a corporation. And I was thinking to myself how that's a pretty authentic thing to do. I would imagine that someone who works in business probably has to do that very thing on a more or less regular basis for their own business. And so just trying to think about not only these skills preparing students for college, but they're really preparing them for the world after college as well. All right. Moving on. Oh, this is a fun one. So I came across this graph a couple years ago, and it kind of struck me because it talks about grade inflation. And so it made me think about what the value of an A is. Because this source comes from USA Today, and the original source is from the College Board. And they looked at grading trends between 1998 and 2016. And they saw that the percentage of A's were trending up, and the percentages of B's were trending down. So I was like, what do I make of this graph? Right? What do I make of this graph? And it sort of struck me that as more and more students get A's, the value of those A's becomes less and less clear, right? We think we know what an A is, but if everyone's getting an A, what is an A? And so I use that to sort of talk about, college acceptances. And, this is a part of the puzzle. We recognize this is something that is important to families and college acceptances. And so if you are applying to a college, as are hundreds, maybe thousands of other students just like you all over the country who have grade point averages that are on par with yours, what sets you apart, right? What gets you noticed in that pile? And so the IB diploma specifically is something that is noteworthy. It is certainly in the state of New Hampshire. We're one of only 2 schools that offer the IB diploma program. It's a little bit more common in the South and in the West than it is in the Northeast. But certainly it is not so prolific that everybody is doing it everywhere. And so it can actually give you a bit of a leg up. So this data is kind of old. It's from 2012. And I've tried to find an updated version of this. And the company that makes it is called iGraduate, is the creators of this particular chart. But the long and the short of it is the universities on the left are pretty selective colleges. There's some Ivies up there. There's some flagship state universities up there. Some pretty tough schools to get into. The kind of schools that students like to name drop, right? Those types of schools. And the second column to the right is the acceptance rate for IB diploma candidates, and then The third column is the total population acceptance rate. And then the green column on the far right shows you the percentage of difference. And the important piece here, if you can't read the numbers because they're too little, and I apologize for that, is that they're all green. So in all of these colleges, at least for the year 2012, there was a statistical likelihood that you were more likely to get into one of these colleges if you were an IB diploma candidate. So some data. And again, based on self-reported data. So if you're taking statistics or you've taken a statistics class, you sort of understand the nature of that data. But we put that in there just to sort of show you that the data suggests backing up what we are suggesting. But this data might be a little more pertinent to you. I just updated this last week. These are the top 15 colleges attended, not accepted, but attended by Bedford High School IB diploma candidates. We had a lot of kids go to Northeastern in the class of 2019. A lot of kids went to Northeastern, so they went from about third or fourth on our list up to like a strong first. UNH is second, Boston College, Tufts, Worcester, or WPI, Colby, Providence, University of Miami, Florida. We had a bunch of kids who went there a few years ago. Villanova, Holy Cross, Simmons, St. Louis, UMass Amherst, Bates, and BU. And that's sort of over time. Those are just raw numbers. So those are where our kids are going, and they've got pretty good success rates in getting there. We've had, Mr. Gizokas, how many graduating classes have we had so far? 2010. So someone who's better at math than me. What does that mean? 9? We've had 10. We've had 10 graduating class. So in 10 years, this is what we have done. And this is just the top. And then I've got a list for miles with like 1s and 2s on it. So these are where our students are going. So I would look at that list on the left and be like, yeah, I would be pretty proud of my son or daughter if they got into any one of those schools. I would pat them on the back and tell them, good job. All right, let's talk about college credit. I was in a classroom today, and even today, I fielded a question from a student who was like, how come schools don't give IB credit? And I was like, say what? Like, that's not true. And actually, what I suggest to students who think that is to Google it. All right, so if you want to know what Northeastern gives for IB exam credit, if you Google Northeastern IB credit, you will probably, your first or second hit will take you right to the page where they tell you how much credit they give for various test scores. But I'm going to make it easier for you, right? I'm giving you the top 10 for Bedford High School, and that's what they offer. Okay, so at this point, you probably know about HL and SLs, although I'll talk about it briefly in a minute. But I just want to point out that not every school is the same, but you can sort of see kind of a trend in there. Generally speaking, if you are taking an HL exam and you're getting a 5 or higher on that, you're likely to get credit wherever it is that you go. It's not universal. And some places offer 4, credit for 4s. Miami, Holy Cross does. I put some other local colleges and universities on here just to sort of give you a little bit more context where some of those are. So you don't really see a big difference between Plymouth and Keene. They're all University System of New Hampshire colleges, so the policies are going to be about the same, and we see some consistency throughout New England with state universities as well. The only outlier really is UMass. They do offer credit for 4s. We actually looked it up today in that class. We looked it up. And not only do they offer credit for an HL score of 4 or higher, they actually offer 2 classes worth of credit, which is pretty exceptional. At UNH, it's the same, believe it or not. If you take HL history at Bedford High School and you score a 5 or higher on that HL history exam, which is pretty close to our school average, you actually can get 8 UNH credits for that, believe it or not, which is the equivalent of 2 classes. And so if you took 4 HL exams, which some of our students do, you could conceivably get up to 32 credits, which, like most colleges and universities, are not going to give you much more than that. So you can actually do quite well with IB exams. And I included Bates on here because they are one of the few that does offer credit for SL exams. I wish more colleges and universities valued SL exams enough to give credit. Sadly, most do not. The majority do not. I know IB is working hard. And actually, IB school organizations, local organizations, work pretty hard to lobby legislatures and things like that to get them to give credit. Up here in the Northeast, we're a bit more provincial. I don't know if Bedford High School's IB coordinator has the lobbying power to convince Concord to change that law. But I know the folks in Massachusetts are trying. And so if that happens in Massachusetts, perhaps we can do something here as well. But Bates does offer for SL credit. And actually, in some places, depending on where you choose to go, some states, such as California, Texas, Florida, and Colorado, those lobbying efforts have been, in fact, so successful that in many of those states, an IB diploma score, a minimum score of, say, 28 or 30, and I'll talk about where that fits into the big picture in a minute, can actually earn you sophomore status, can give you a bypass. And so this screenshot actually came from a parent. This is probably 4 years ago. And she was so surprised when she logged in to check her daughter's account to find out that her daughter, who was about to leave for college, was a sophomore. And she was like, wait, why is my daughter a sophomore? She just graduated from high school. And this was one of those situations where, the young lady picked the school she wanted to go to without knowing about the benefits from the IB diploma, only to find out once she enrolled that she was enrolled as a sophomore. So in case you can't see it, I made a little arrow and a circle. There you go. So there she is. She is a sophomore on day one. So Florida, you want to go to Florida State. Florida State will admit you as a sophomore with a diploma score of 28 or higher. All right? So I bring these up. These are some examples. Again, it is not a universal rule. Every college and university has its own unique policy regarding credit specifically. So I always encourage students, think about the schools you're interested in going to and research it. See what they offer. Because it could be more than you thought. It could be less than you thought. But that knowledge is useful. All right. Any questions? So far, so good. Excellent. All right, let's talk about how it works here at BHS. All right, so here's some of the stuff that if I came to your class, right, last year around January, or if you came to our IB Info Night, which we have every year in January, some of this is going to be familiar to you. I've kind of condensed it and nutshelled it for you. But basically, there are 6 what we call subject groups in IB: English, World Language, Individuals and Societies, which is their way of saying social studies, Science, Math, and the Arts. And to get the IB diploma, you have to take an exam in each one of those 6 subject groups. However, IB will permit you to substitute out the art in favor of a second social study or a second science. Many Bedford High School students are able to get the diploma and get all the science that they want in their transcript by doubling up in science. That's fairly common to do. But actually, we've added several social studies offerings. We've added world religions and business management over the past couple years. And so now we're starting to see students double up in that, which as a social studies teacher, I'm thrilled with. But that's what you have to do. You have to get those 6 exams. You have to take the 3 core requirements. Theory of knowledge, which is the class. Bob talked about that a few minutes ago. Complete something called the extended essay. And juniors, I will see you in this room tomorrow during Advisory A to talk about the extended essay. Don't worry, you guys are in very good hands. You're in very good hands, trust me. All right? And something called creativity and activity and service, which I'll talk about in a bit. It's good to know the difference between HL and SL. The letters stand for higher level and standard level. The big distinction between a higher level exam and a standard level exam is the amount of time that you spend learning the material before you are exam ready. So an SL exam requires 150 hours, and HL is 240 hours. So 240 hours is a solid 2 years, which is why if you want to take HL English or history, French, chemistry, you got to put in those 2 years, like a full 2 years. SLs, we can get a little bit more creative with prerequisites. For example, IB Business Management. If you take Intro to Business, you can then go into 1 year of IB Business Management and you're good to go. So we get a little creative there. In some of the sciences, there's no way to do it because we don't have the prerequisites. So, for example, Chemistry SL and Chemistry HL are both 2-year programs. And it's sometimes difficult to think about, putting together a puzzle, how you're going to fit in 2 years of 2 different sciences. That's a real challenge. That's what I'm here to help you with, okay? That's what I'm here to help you with. In order to earn the diploma, students have to take at least 3 HL and 3 SL exams. You can take 4 and 2. That is allowed. IB does not want you to take more than 4 HL exams because they care about your well-being and they want you to be more than just an academic. All right, isn't that nice? But you have to take those 3 and 3 or 4 and 2. Each exam is scored on a 1 to 7 scale, and a passing diploma score is a 24. So that's an average of 4. So oftentimes we say passing an IB exam is a 4. But that's really, there is no passing of an IB exam. It's graded on a 1 to 7 scale. And if you are an IB diploma candidate, that total should equal 24 or higher. There are some other caveats in there as well. You can't get any 1s, you can't get more than 2 2s, you got to get X number on HLs, and so forth. But that information, that sort of nitty-gritty information, gets shared out to students. I'll give you something called the General Diploma Requirements document, and it's all in there, okay? All right, any questions on the diploma requirements? A lot of info on one slide. All right. Let's talk about the diploma core. So, in the United States, and as the AP coordinator, I can say this, I would say that probably most of you are more familiar with AP from your own experiences in high school, and so forth. And AP works great, because you can take those classes sort of a la carte, right? You want a little AP Psych, take some AP Psych, right? You want a little AP Human Geography, it's a thing, right? Take a little AP Human Geography, right? That's great. And you could sort of pick and choose, right? It's like, cable, right? It'd be nice to just pick the channels I want to watch and not get all the channels that I don't want to watch. IB's approach is a little bit different. They don't say, you want some psych, have some psych. They say, I look at you as a human being. I want to educate you as a human being. And I think in order to do that and do that well, we have to think of this as a full program. And so the IB Diploma Core is really important for what IB wants to do. All right, it includes TOK, EE, and CAS. So important that I want to share this diagram with you. There's a lot going on in this circle, but I just want to point out, if you start with the student in the center, if what we are doing here is for the benefit of the students, we should be putting students in the center of our philosophy. And working out from there, approaches to teaching and approaches to learning are really the what's happening on the ground in the classroom. And actually, even though those seem like fancy words for IB, if you are a Bedford High School student and you are comfortable with competencies, then you are comfortable with approaches to teaching and learning, because that's what they are. Our competencies and IB's approaches to teaching and learning are aligned. And then moving outward from there, theory of knowledge, extended essay, and CAS. And so as you move outward from the student, if the student is the center, IB puts the diploma core closer to what is important to the student than the actual subjects that they learn. And that's kind of a crazy thing if you think about it, right? How can this class about knowledge, how can this really long essay I have to write be more important for me than the chemistry class that I'm taking, right? Or the novel I'm reading in my English literature class. And I think sometimes because, we worry about grades and we worry about our GPA, that some of those day-to-day stuff that we have in class sometimes feel really important. But some of the conversations that I've had with students who have gone through the program and graduated and come back, and I say, what do you remember? Like, what do you remember most fondly? What do you think had the biggest impact? They'll tell me about their extended essay. They'll tell me about their CAS project. That seems to be the thing that makes the biggest impact on the person despite all the hard work that they put into all of the classes that they took and all those tests, right, and all those assessments that they worked towards. And I think that is by design. If that's what I'm hearing, then I think we're doing it right. So here we go. Here's our IB Diploma Core team. These are some important people. I adore these people. These are some of my favorite people, not just in the building, but in the world. All right, so left to right, we have Amy Woods. She's the Dean of Alternative Programs. She does a lot of stuff here at Bedford High School. She does RWL. She does MST. She does the adult ed program in the evenings and the 20-credit diploma. I mean, she just does a ton of stuff. She's also the CAS coordinator. And I'll talk about CAS in a few minutes. But the reason that Mrs. Woods is the CAS coordinator is because of all the people in the building, I don't know many who have a bigger heart than she has. And I don't know many people who are as well connected to the various communities around Bedford as she is. She knows people everywhere. So she's a real asset to us in the building and is especially a great asset for us for CAS. Mrs. Gilchrist, you see her in the library every day, working hard, building stuff, making that place a more fun place to hang out to her own detriment, right? She's made the library so wonderful a place to be that everyone wants to be there, making her job more difficult. But her expertise in the library sciences make her the perfect person to be our EE coordinator. And so tomorrow, she and I will be in here to walk you guys through the very first steps of your EE journey. And very underutilized resource in terms of her research, knowledge, and understanding. And then, of course, on the right, Mr. Zeller. That's a pretty funny picture. I love Mr. Zeller. He and I used to coach skiing together, so we know each other pretty well. And he's the other theory of knowledge teacher besides myself. And so we meet every week to talk about TOK and try to get things consistent and aligned. And I learned so much from him every time we talk. So he is just a great teacher. He also teaches French, by the way, for that job. So chances are you will spend some quality time with all three of these individuals. So you should know who they are. All right, diving into TOK. If I were to sum up TOK in one question, it's what do we know and how do we know it? And that is really the universal question of the class. I'll give you a sample TOK prompt on the next slide. Kids start TOK 1 their junior year. They take it semester 2 of their junior year, and they finish TOK with TOK 2 the first semester of their senior year. IB wants us to teach TOK over the course of 2 years. They want it to sort of bridge the span between junior year and senior year. There's no one right way to do it. This is how we do it. We start it halfway through junior year. We finish it halfway through senior year. I am really excited that this year, juniors in TOK 1 will be in that class with not just IB diploma candidates, which I think will be really, really great for the atmosphere in that class. And I actually think it fits really well with the philosophy of IB because getting more voices in that room, more perspectives in that room, I think makes us all better. And so I'm really excited about that. What does it really do? I think first and foremost, I think the folks who designed TOK for the IB looked at the mission statement and said, if we wanted a class that really addresses the mission statement directly, I think that this would be it. This might be how we designed it. It's also important, in the circle graphic I brought up earlier sort of alludes to this, is it sort of like something that unifies the 6 subject areas. And so this is the example I like to use, and you've probably heard me say this already before, but as a history teacher, I often try to help kids develop strong sort of arguments, right? How are you going to support your claims in a history paper? And the process that you would do that is really the same that you would use to prove that 2 triangles are congruent, which sounds really crazy because triangles in history don't have a whole lot in common. But the approach that you would use to prove a theorem is not that different than the approach you would use to prove a claim in history, right? You back it up with concrete evidence. You try to let that evidence lead from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's really something that you're only going to get in TOK, because I don't expect a math teacher, a geometry teacher, to drop some history And I don't expect a history teacher to drop some geometry. But in TOK, we can do that. And there's power in recognizing how different subjects are maybe more similar than we might think. So that's something we focus a lot on in TOK. I think sort of at its most basic, it confronts the messy nature of knowledge. We think we know a lot. We don't often ask where that knowledge comes from. And in this day and age, I think we're asking more and more whether we can rely on that knowledge. And those are pretty powerful questions. They're very introspective, but they open us up to a lot of opportunities for exploration and conversation. And ideally, some true understanding. And then, of course, equipping students to eloquently develop arguments. When I use the word argument, I use it sort of in the traditional like logic sense, like the philosophy sense, not like yelling, arguing, but like developing a series of premises to support a conclusion. The assessments in TOK, you guys will be doing this. There's two that you do. One is a presentation that you will give in class that we grade. It's the IA for TOK. We grade it. And we actually just looked at our feedback from the IA from the presentations today. We looked at our feedback from last year. And we learned some things. We did pretty well. We did better than we expected, so that's good. On our moderation, we were moderated just a smidge. But it was good. Felt like we hit some things on the mark, which is good. And then the other thing is an essay on a prescribed title, which is just a fancy word for you answer a single question in a 1,600-word essay. Do you want to see a sample of one? Okay, ready? So you can start thinking about how you might answer this question if you had to. The quality of knowledge is best measured by the number of people who accept it. Discuss this claim with reference to two areas of knowledge. So how would you do that, right? There's a whole process here, right? So this is the type of question that we might confront in a theory of knowledge class. It doesn't ask us about anything specific. Actually asks a pretty general question that has a lot of very specific things in there that we probably don't think about, right? Like, for example, quality of knowledge. Do we ever really qualify knowledge? Do we think some knowledge is better than other knowledge? If so, by what measure? Is that by the number of people who accept it? How do you measure the quality of knowledge? What does it mean to accept knowledge? Like, how far do you have to accept it to cross the line into acceptance? These are questions we ask and we talk about. They're not easy questions, right? They make you think in a way that you're not used to thinking, that maybe you don't have a lot of experience thinking. All right, but the possibilities, the things you can learn from engaging in that process can actually pay pretty big dividends in all of your other classes, and I think that's the goal. By the way, that was a prompt that the seniors who graduated last year actually had to write. They had a choice of 6 to choose from, and I would say maybe a third, maybe a quarter to a third chose that particular prompt to write on, so I picked it because I thought it was a popular one, and I think it's pretty accessible too. All right, extended essay. Research is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with a purpose. The extended essay is an independent, sustained research paper. And here's the most important thing about the extended essay. It's not the paper, it's the process. Right? It's the process, not the paper. A lot of times as students, right, you guys are so worried about like whether or not the thing that you produce is going to be good. I can tell you as a teacher, more often I have students who come up to me and say, "Can you read this and tell me if it's good?" And my answer really should be like, "Well, why don't you tell me what you learned in the process of doing it?" That might be the right question, the right response to that question, right? In the extended essay, it really is about that process. In the history of Bedford High School, I will tell you this tomorrow, in the history of Bedford High School, no student has ever failed the extended essay for IB. Not one. Every extended essay has passed, right? If that doesn't tell you that IB cares more about the process than the product, I don't know what other data point will. But I'm going to give you a little sort of preview of what you guys are going to see tomorrow, and this is actually going to help parents as well to sort of put this in context of when things are going to be happening. Here's our rough schedule. We're actually going to begin this process tomorrow. We're going to begin this process with you guys tomorrow. And so fall of junior year, you are matched up with a supervisor. This does not happen right away. It happens a little ways into the process once you sort of get down the road a little bit and you've sort of committed to a subject area and maybe a couple topic ideas. will match you up with a supervisor with whom you will meet roughly 3 to 5 times throughout the process. And that's it. It's designed to be mostly independent. The supervisor is there to help you. I'll talk about that on the next slide. During the fall and into the winter, you continue to explore your topic, vet sources, find good quality sources, continue to do research. You cannot do research without spending time. It does not happen without spending the time. That is the hardest part of this whole process, is finding and using that time. But by March, you will have 3,000 words written. 3,000 words written. In pages, that's probably somewhere around 12 or so, 13, 14 pages of written work. And some of that will be really, really good and really, really useful. Some of it might need to be revised significantly. And then you have what is called a feedback draft. A full feedback draft will be due to your supervisor in April, right before intersession. Not immediately before intersession, but before intersession. And then your supervisor will read it and give you feedback on it. That's why it's the feedback draft. And then you will have the entirety of the summer to revise it. You could use 0 time during the summer to revise it. You could use a bunch of time. That's up to you, right? It is not a requirement, because when you get back to school, you have until September 30th to finalize it. This is a date that we have held to for the past few years. It makes the beginning of senior year a little bit crazy, but if you start thinking about all the things you're going to be doing during your senior year, all the IAs that you're going to be starting, and also importantly, many of you will probably be applying to college early action, so you'll start working on those college applications in the fall. Getting this done and out of the way actually really helps you, all right, throughout senior year. So that's in sort of a snapshot what that process is going to look like. So you start it tomorrow, and it'll be a year of your life. And when you walk away, you will be proud. If you put the time in, you will be proud of what you did, because it's impressive. It is an impressive piece of work. Your job is to do the EE, to put in the time, to do the research, to commit to that process, to meet your supervisor when you say you're going to meet your supervisor, to write a good paper, right? That's your role. The role of your supervisor is to help you, is to answer questions, to give you ideas, to help you through the stumbling blocks, through the roadblocks, provide you with materials. I often supervise history essays, and I'm like, oh, I have a book on this, here, take this. I have a book on this, here, take this. That's one of the things that I do. Role of Mrs. Gilchrist. As the EE supervisor, she sort of runs the Google Classroom. She also runs the Power School gradebook, so there will be assignments that you have to complete as part of this process that get sort of graded for completion, but graded nonetheless, and she sort of keeps that. She's also, as I mentioned before, a very underutilized resource in terms of her understanding of research methodology, and in order to leverage the databases that we have here. She knows how to use those. And so ask those questions, all right? Ask those questions. And my role, I have a couple roles when it comes to EE. I am a supervisor for students. I also become a bit of the person who tracks you down when you haven't turned stuff in. If Mrs. Gilchrist is good cop, I am not as good cop. When it comes to that, that's sort of my role, to sort of keep you guys on task, to encourage you to get stuff done. But, fun fact, I am also an examiner for IB, and I actually grade history extended essays for IB. So, if you want a little insight on how to do well, I have some pro tips that I'd be happy to share with you. And some of those pro tips are universal. They will help you no matter what the subject you are writing in, but others of them are specific to history. So I have that to offer as well. I've done that for 2 years now. So I've got a little experience under my belt in that role. All right, let's talk, yes. So how does this fit into the diploma program from a points standpoint? I told you before that in order to earn the IB diploma, you need 24 total points across 6 exams each graded out of 7, so a maximum of 42. However, how well you do on extended essay and theory of knowledge, if you play our little battleship game here, you actually can earn additional points to your overall diploma score. So if you get an A on TOK assessments and EE, and these are not A's from Bedford High School, these are A's as graded by IB, you will get 3 additional diploma points added to your score. If you get an A and a B, also 3, and then you can sort of see on down from there. If you get D's in both, you get 0 points added to your diploma score, but you don't fail. You don't fail. If you get an E, which technically stands for elementary, which is funny because none of the other letters stand for anything, but if you get an E, then that is considered a failing condition and you do not earn the IB diploma. But that's never happened in TOK or extended essay in the 10 years that we've had IB diploma classes at Bedford High School. So, you know, there's someday there will be a first. I don't think it'll be with you guys, okay? I'm pretty confident in what you guys will be able to do. And so there is value to be gained by doing well in either EE or TOK or TOK. And I will say that we have had students who, were it not for that 1 point that they got in TOK and EE, would not have earned the IB diploma. And conversely, we've had some students miss it by just this much, and if they had maybe put a little more time and energy into that extended essay, it might have been the difference. So for many students, these little points actually do matter. They actually do make a difference. CAS, creativity, activity, and service. I adore these kids. I miss these kids terribly. They were great kids, but they've moved on to bigger and better things. And CAS is really about educating the whole person. So if you think all the way back to the beginning when I showed you those learner profile attributes, really the top 4 were about academics, and the remaining 6 were really about what we might call social and emotional, maybe civic education, and that's what CAS really gets at. It stands for creativity, activity, and service. And one of the things about CAS is that it really comes together at the end, all right? It really comes together at the end. So I talk to a lot of kids who are like, I don't know if I'm on track for CAS. And I always answer that question with, are you doing stuff, extracurricular stuff, right? Are you in a club? Do you participate in sports? Do you dance? Do you do community theater? Are you involved in scouts? Do you volunteer for your church? Right? Do you go out and run road races on your own? All of those things that you do that make you a whole person, the stuff that you care about outside of school, counts towards CAS. That stuff counts. Back in the day, years ago, the process was you had to log hours. I spent this many hours doing this, I spent this many hours doing that. That is no longer the way that CAS operates. Now, what ends up happening is at the end of your senior year, by the end of your senior year and at the end of your senior year, you will have done 3 important things, the 3 Ps of CAS. You will have reflected on your many experiences, your many extracurricular experiences through, and a project that you do in a portfolio and a presentation. So project, presentation, portfolio. And those are things that we are bringing to the seniors in a couple of weeks. We're going to sort of show them what they're going to have to complete by the end of the year to this end. So for you guys as juniors, this is something that right now is not something that needs to be huge on your radar. What you need to know about CAS right now is that you should be thinking about what it is that you do outside of the classroom, as a part of the school and outside of school, that makes you a better whole person, and how you might reflect on those things, okay? One thing that you will have to do, and you can do this junior year, I've actually had some students ask me, can I do my CAS project junior year? I said, you should. You should do your CAS project junior year if you can fit it in. It is not like a senior project. All right, for those of you who have siblings who are seniors or have friends who are seniors and doing senior project, they sort of embark on an 8-month journey with various checkpoints along the way, and it's completely individual. With a CAS project, it has to be related to one of those 3 stands. It has to either be creative or active or service-oriented or any combination of those 3. But what's important about the CAS project is it has to be collaborative And it has to exist in real life. It has to be something that happens, something that you initiate, plan for, and execute in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be long, can be a month, maybe even less. And believe it or not, we have a lot of CAS projects that students have done in the past that are now what we call legacy projects. So a new group of students comes up, they sort of take over. One of my favorites is the Empty Bowls event, which is a night where, I don't think it's on this particular list, but it's one of my favorites, where the ceramics class makes ceramic bowls, and then the CAS project kids go out to local restaurants and they get donations of soup, and then we go down to the cafeteria and we eat soup in the bowls that the ceramics class made, and then all the money goes to help the New Hampshire Food Bank. And just the planning and facilitating of that whole process is a CAS project, right? It is not this huge mammoth undertaking that is impossible for the average student to do. These are some examples. I asked Mrs. Woods for some of her favorites in the past. Some girls did a book drive for Girls Inc. This is like about 3 years ago. And they had so many books, they had to actually go to other Girls Inc. locations to give them books because they had too many. Manchester Girls Inc. said, we have enough books. Like, you need to share these with other people. So, and then another one on here is Bollywood Night, which is maybe a little bit different because you might think like, what's the service component to that? Well, we had some students here whose families were from India and were wanted to share their sort of cultural experiences, things that were important to them from their own cultural background with a wider audience. And so they held a Bollywood night where they watched some Bollywood film and talked about some of the things that are in there, some things that students could learn about India and about Bollywood. So again, not necessarily service-oriented, but definitely creative, and in its own way, probably connected to activity, right? So these are some just examples. And I always tell students, if you have an idea for a CAS project, go talk to Mrs. Woods. If you don't have any ideas for a CAS project, go talk to Mrs. Woods, because she's got a whole folder full of ones just waiting for students to take them up, okay? And it's never too early to start. All right, real quick, planning ahead, running the marathon. Ah, yes, where can you find good information to plan ahead? Now, most of you probably already have a plan. Many of you sat down with me during the sort of course selection phase last year, and we sort of mapped out your diploma plan. But I just want to let you know, this is just a screenshot of the Bedford High School IB homepage. I put a lot of information on that page. It is there available to the world for you. And so the little tabs, it's an older screenshot. The tabs are a little bit different. Some of that stuff, the newsletter is, for example, no longer there. And planning has now been replaced by something called How Do I Earn the IB Diploma? Tried to make it a little more clear. So check that out. There's a lot of good information there to help you through the process. I also included in the packet on the very back sort of a 2-year planner sheet that we use to help map out kids' schedules. Cost. Here's some great news. This happened right before school started. I got an email from the Director General of the IB. It was not to me. It was to like everybody on the list. And she was pleased to announce that IB is doing away with its registration fee. Now, this is really great news for you guys, all right? This is really great news for you guys, because it used to be IB required you to pay a $172 fee on top of $119 for each exam that you wanted to take. It's a lot. That's a lot, and I think IB recognized that they were asking more than what they needed, and frankly, as we've become a more digital society, actually most of the exams that kids take get sent to Alabama, where they get scanned and then uploaded digitally all around the world. And so that's how the process works. So there's some economies of scale to that they're able to leverage. And because they don't really have to do so many clerical things via paper, they were able to figure out how to make the exams, the registration fee, go away, which is fantastic news. Because $172 that you don't have to pay is $172 that you do not have to pay. So now you just pay per exam at a $119 rate. per exam. Just for reference sake, AP exams cost $94 a piece. So there's a $25 difference between an AP exam and an IB exam. A student asked me why the cost is different, and my answer is because half of most AP exams is graded on a Scantron by a bubble sheet, and you don't have to pay the Scantron very much. But there are very few, only the lab sciences in IB have a multiple choice component. So for history, all the history exams are long form written, which has to be read by a human being. And so it's just going to cost more. So the total cost for 6 exams, I only bring this up because you are IB Diploma students, and so you will be taking your 6 exams. Right now, $119. I can't guarantee that the price won't go up next year, but it has stayed at $119 for the past 3 years. This is the 3rd year in a row it's been this cost. So $714 is $119 times 6. And again, this is important. I've been into a lot of classrooms to talk about IB exam registration because we're just starting that process now already for the fall. But there is financial aid available, and I want you to know that because in the registration form, I say this to the kids, there's a spot where if you want to know more about financial aid, just click yes, and I will reach out to you and share that information with you individually and directly. But we are fortunate enough to have the ability to help out students and families with the cost of IB exams, and that is based on the number of people who ask. We spread it out to everybody who asks, and we've never had to, no student has ever been prohibited from taking an IB exam because of cost, I'm happy to say. All right, this is Brian. I adore Brian. He's a great kid. This is, as juniors, if you talk to a senior or a graduate about sort of the IB diploma experience, they might tell you something that more or less replicates this series of photographs. Poor Brian, he's got all this work to do. He's trying to start. He doesn't know where to go. He puts his head down. How am I going to do it? I'm happy to say Brian lived. He survived. He made it. He went to a great school. He's doing great things. And he's a great kid, right? And he did it. So if Brian can do it, so can you. And Mr. T, who is my unofficial spokesperson and spirit animal, will tell you that you can do it. You can do it. And if you need data to prove that, if you need data to back it up, I have some of that too. We have at Bedford High School from 2010 to 2019 an 88% pass rate for the IB diploma. An 88% pass rate for the IB diploma. Compared to the world average, which is 77.4%. So compared to the world average, we're doing pretty well. If you were to ask me, hey, Mr. Cannon, like as an educator, how do you feel about that number, 88%? I would say that's a great number, but I would rather have more kids try and not make it and have that number go down than to have to exclude kids and have that number go up. So while I'm proud of how high that number is, I'd be okay to see it go down if it meant more kids were pushing themselves. And as Mr. Jizoka said at the beginning, like we do believe that it benefits all kids. And this is especially true in the past 2 years. We've had more kids than ever try the IB diploma. And our average has gone down a little bit because of it. But I stand by my belief that those students are going to be better prepared for college because they had been a part of it. And so those are the numbers. So second to last slide, this contact information. If you want to get in touch with anybody, I should have put Mr. Jizokas up there, but I'm sure you all have his email and know how to get in touch with him. But you can get in touch with me by cannonj@bedfordnhk12.net. We do have a dedicated IB BHS, a BHS IB account. I don't check that email as often as I probably ought to because it sort of is a non-owned account. It's sort of operated by me. But if you want to get a question, if you have a question for me, shoot me an email. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to you. in a timely manner. And students, I've been saying this a lot. If you have a question, the best way to get your question answered right away is to come visit me in my office. I'm not always there. I'm out and about in the building. I have my class and stuff. But I can't think of an instance where I wasn't already with a student or a teacher where I didn't drop whatever it was I was doing to help you, okay? Like, of all the things that I have to do, the most important thing that I have to do is to help you be successful in this program. So, with that in mind, I certainly appreciate you guys hanging with me through a fairly long presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. The floor is yours. Yes, question.
So what is the difference between paper 1 and paper 2 on the IB exam? Is it just 2 parts of the exam, or what's the difference?
Yes, the question was, what's the difference between a paper 1 and a paper 2 in an IB exam? And you're correct, they're just 2 different parts of an exam. So all IB exams have, as Mr. Jazokis pointed out, an external and an internal component. Of those external exams are written exams that happen in May. Unlike an AP exam, which gives you like 3 hours and everything all at once, IB tends to split it up into smaller chunks. And one of the reasons they do that is because it allows them to isolate specific skills. So it's going to depend a little bit on the subject of what that looks like. I'll give you the history example, where in HL history there's a paper 1, a paper 2, and a paper 3. The paper 1, what they do is they give you a bunch of small historical sources, and you have to do a series of 5 questions related to those. Summarize them, and compare and contrast them, evaluate them, and then write an essay in which you use them as evidence. All in 1 hour. It's a very difficult exam to do well in an hour. And then the paper 2 is a series of very broad, open-ended history questions where you respond in essays. And then the paper 3 are a little bit more narrowly focused content questions, also essays that you answer in a long-form essay. And so every subject, the paper 1 is going to look a little bit different than other subjects because it's specific to that subject. But they really are just taking something that could be done over 3 hours or more and chunking it into smaller things. And so there's paper 1s in every subject. There's paper 2s in every subject, except music and film and visual arts.
So for example, math would be paper 1, no calculus.
Yes. So in math, yes. I think I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and I just can't. Yeah. With the paper 1 and the paper 2, sometimes it's different math. Sometimes it's focusing on different topics. I do think in the math paper 1, in math SL and math HL, but not math studies, I believe it's no calculator for the paper 1. Math studies, you can use your calculator. But I'm trying to remember a little detail from last May, but yes. Question? Is there any status update on the possibility of IB Latin HL? There is not yet. I'm letting Mr. Jazokis, get the year started before I hit him with that bad boy. Yeah, and I got to get Mr. Roop up to speed first too. So, but it is on the radar. Yes. Yes, sir. Oh, for the extended essay? Some of the titles? Goodness. What I can tell you is that if you go to, I don't know if Mrs. Gilchrist has posted historical examples on the website. I don't think she has for privacy reasons. I'm trying to think. I didn't have anybody. I can tell you from my own experience some of the topics that students have covered. So a couple years ago, I had a student who, for her history essay, tried to look at the outcome of the Russian Civil War, and specifically in the Russian Civil War, there was the Reds and the Whites, and she was looking at the Whites and whether or not the way that they fought that war impacted the way that Stalin evaluated the West during the Cold War. So she tried to draw a line, right, from one to another. And I thought that was a very difficult task. I thought it was a hard essay, but she did pretty well with it despite that. I also had another student who looked at the Cultural Revolution in China and sort of looked at the extent to which she sort of looked at some of the people who are, after the fact, blamed for the Cultural Revolution and tried to actually do an evaluation of where that blame should have been gone around, like where that blame should have ended up. I had another student who looked at the Civil War in Sudan and tried to trace that all the way back to basically Islamic expansion. And so those are some of the things that these students did because they probably saw something that kind of piqued their interest in that, or you know, when they learned about China in their history class, they were like, wow, I've really never learned this before, and I'd like to learn more about it. And so those are some of the things in our experience, in my experience. I've had some really good ones along the way. Actually, one of the best ones I ever did was a philosophy paper, which we don't really allow anymore because we don't teach IB philosophy, and we had kids doing EEs in subjects we don't teach, and we weren't able to help them effectively. But he got an A on that philosophy paper, so I was very proud of him because it was good. But what will happen is Mrs. Gilchrist has those in a file, and over the course of the year, students have basically access to that file to look at examples. And actually, that's something we talked about today, about showing students what EEs look like early so that they kind of have a sense of what it is that they're in for. Yeah. Yes? Possibly. So right now we have Spanish, French, Latin, and Mandarin. And currently, actually, we don't have a Mandarin teacher, so we have our Mandarin students finishing. They phased out the program at the district level, and so what we are doing is helping those students complete their IB diploma path through an online school called Pamoja. I don't know if Pamoja offers anything. I really only know that they offer Spanish, French, and Mandarin. They may offer something else in there, and I just didn't catch it. Sometimes when it comes to world languages, it's going to be very tough because a student who does not have any world language experience prior to entering Bedford High School in 9th grade might say, like, I will not be able to get to level 5. So I won't be eligible to take the test. What I would recommend is let's have a conversation with that student. We'll see where they're at. We'll talk to some of the teachers and the Dean of World Language and see if there's a way we can get them to be test ready by the end of year 4. And in lieu of that, there are some other possibilities. If the student is a native speaker of another language, there's sort of an option there that we can explore. But in terms of what we offer sort of on the books, open to all, it's French, Spanish, and Latin. But if you have a specific question about your son or daughter and want to see, like, definitely shoot me an email because that's a fairly uncommon thing, and we can explore some of the possibilities that we have. I'm always confident there's a solution. There may not be one, but I believe there is one until it's proven otherwise. So I'm a glass half full kind of person, you know what I mean? Can't help it. Any other questions? All right, well, listen, if things come up, if you think of a question on your way out, please don't be shy. Send me an email. I'm happy to respond to that and help you with whatever you have. Juniors, I will see you here tomorrow morning during Advisory A. It'll be a lot of fun. And for everyone, just thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to come here and to be here for this. I hope it was informative. Take an extra packet if you need it, because I have plenty. And thanks so much for coming. Thank you.